Reggie here, your friendly neighborhood bodybuilder and comic book collector, and I want to welcome you to another one of my videos. This is, in many ways, a very special video, and it is a special video because this video is where I show you and share with you the conversation that I recently had with the legendary Chris Claremont. I was very fortunate to have been invited by CGC down to Sarasota, Florida to basically spend the day with Chris and tour the facility and talk to some other people at CGC. But really the focus was to spend some time with Chris Claremont, a writer that I essentially have grown up with. This was my opportunity to talk to him, to get to know him, to better understand him as a writer. And he did not disappoint. Let me tell you, he did not disappoint in any way, shape, or form. And we discussed over the course of several hours a host of topics spanning the decades of his career. And I found his humor, his sarcasm, his range, if you will, in the types of topics that he could talk about. I found it all to be entertaining. And it is in many ways the highlight of my comic book career, if you want to call it that. This was extremely enjoyable, and I am very thankful to CGC for having extended this opportunity to me because it was really rewarding. And so in this video, essentially what I'm going to be doing is sharing with you a series of clips of a longer conversation that I've kind of parsed down. And I will apologize to you in advance because there is a lot of background noise in this video, but it's because it was at a private signing and there was a lot of activity. There was a lot of commotion that was going on as Chris was signing these books and he was talking to me and all of the other things that happened to be going on. But I'll be honest with you, I think the real focus when you get into this video is still going to be on the things that Chris was saying and not so much on the ambient noise that was around us. In this very first clip that you're going to see, I started off by asking Chris some questions about what I think he is known for. And in my mind, what he's really known for is creating these very complex and three-dimensional characters that capture our imagination. And so my question to him was, how much of those characters is forethought versus an evolutionary thing versus a combination of forethought and planning and evolution? And essentially what I heard from him is that it's a combination. He spends a lot of time thinking about these characters. Who are they? What are their motivations? What are they trying to accomplish? And then by creating these complex characters and then putting them together, there is some magic that happens where they evolve over time because of the conflict that they essentially get into, and they become even more complicated and even more three-dimensional and also interesting to us as readers and maybe even to him as a writer. But I've tried to explain it, but I think it's probably best that I allow Chris to explain his point of view. And once he does that, we're going to go into a few other snippets of our conversation. I hope that you enjoy.
When you say, did I think about it in advance? Yeah, because I'm always thinking about it. I'm always thinking about the characters, because the best of stories grow out of the interaction of characters. You figure out who the people are, and you throw them in a room together and see what happens next. As Archie said, when we combined Power Man and Iron Fist, and I was sitting there and saying, I have no idea what to do with this. And Archie said, are you serious? And I said, I don't know. And he said, look at the four characters. You put Colleen, Misty, Luke, and Danny in a room together and ask them what they want for breakfast. You've got a fight right there, or a conflict right there. Yeah. Stan and Jack's best stories grew from the characters of Thor interacting with Jane Foster and his dad and Asgard, or Reed and Ben and Sue and Johnny just trying to figure out who does dinner, who does the dishes, that sort of thing. It's not, you sit down and think, ooh, who is the most evil enemy they could go up against? It's, okay, what does Dr. Doom want? What does Reed want? How does that interact? You know, how do you deal with your preschool kid when you're a superhero? What happens if you can't pay the rent? I mean, think of the number of times the FF have gone bankrupt and had to renegotiate the lease to the Baxter building, or they've lost the Baxter building and they're on the road. That's real life for many readers, especially today.
Where does the inspiration to tell these fantastic stories come from?
It's like when I'm talking with kids or talking with people, and they say, what is your passionate love? And I say, well, acting. Really? Yeah. And I said, but how do you feel about writing? And I said, well, how do you feel about breathing? I have no idea where this instinct comes from. All I know for sure is it is as essential to me as being alive as breathing. One never knows where a story will come from. One never knows if it's a story that'll work. You just start writing and see what happens. Writing is stealing from the experiences of life and exploiting them, or twisting them. Because the advantage I have is that the world I create isn't the world we live in. But again, that's why, for me as a writer, where I was going with the X-Men was, my problem was, my perspective, Charlie was in many ways a liability because he was perfect.
You mean Charles Xavier?
Yes.
Charlie, okay.
Sorry, I've known him too long. He's a liability.
No, we're still on a formal basis, he and I, so.
No, but the thing with Charlie is that he's perfect already. The only thing you could do was give him back his legs, which I did at least twice. The problem was, it's like I couldn't do anything lasting to him other than give him a happy ending, which I was all cool with, but from a dramaturgical point of view, not good for the book. So I set up a situation where dying Charlie at the end of the trial of Magneto sort of blackmails Magneto into taking over the school. The flip side of it being, as a teacher, he has to care for them. If you're caring for kids, you can't go around trying to conquer the world. What I wanted to set up with him taking over the school is, for me, that introduces a level of dramatic conflict into the school that did not exist with Charlie. Because what you have now is a guy running the school who is, for all intents and purposes, he hasn't changed. Except now he's responsible for kids. Why does that mean something to him? Because he watched his own daughter die, burned to death, and he couldn't save her. He was imprisoned. So now he's responsible for kids. The kids know who he is. The kids are terrified because, it's like, oh God, right.
Yeah.
So the whole point with Magneto is, I'll keep my word. But because he's Magneto, every so often the opportunity would arise for him to be tempted. Well, I'll just step one little bit over towards the dark side that will allow me to save the day. No one will notice, and I can always step back. And the kids will be going, no, 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 can't do that. But at the same time, Magneto's looking at one of the kids, who is Illyana, who is evil. Yeah, I mean, it's like as Bill and I were exploring in the New Mutants last year, she is evil. She knows she's evil. She likes it. Except there's a part of her that is a New Mutant, who's ethical, who wants to be a friend, who wants to be a good person. So that's the struggle in her. So, and Magneto knows this, so he's fighting as hard as he can to keep her safe. because if she goes bad, she'll drag him down and he'll drag the kids down. But in the process, he has, you know, he can make a misstep. So everybody's watching everybody because they're all scared of what might happen. But at the same time, the fact that they triumph over it is a moment of satisfaction for them and hopefully for the readers. Golly, we're talking drama here.
One of the things that I was reading, there was a statement here, and I'm gonna paraphrase it, that it was along the lines of, you don't want to just tell stories about superheroes or be in the present day, or to just talk about simple depictions of good versus evil. And I thought that was a really interesting statement, right? And I thought it was interesting because so often creative people are interested in pushing the boundaries of creativity and pushing their own boundaries.
Well, I think everyone's interested in pushing one's own boundaries. The thing to bear in mind is the era in which I was doing this. We were locked in place by the Comics Code. We had a definitive list of what we could not do. So part of the fun was, how can we get away with doing all the things we want to do, but in such a way that doesn't ring a bell with the code?
Right.
The flip side of that is, well, welcome to the joy of complexity. So you write a story that ostensibly is on one level, that a 12-year-old could read and not be offended, etc., but you do it in such a way with so many elements in the visual frame or the textual frame or what have you, that if you come back and read it when you're in your 20s or even better in your 40s or 50s, you see levels that weren't as readily apparent when you read it as a kid. What's your favorite story in the X-Men? And I basically say 94 to 279, page 11. Because from my perspective, it's one story.
Right. And I think that I've heard a couple of quotes from you along the lines of that it is one long story with different offshoots that may have gone down different story arcs or into different titles, but it's essentially a single story that you told over time.
Because they're the same characters, it's the same situation. The irony is that by the time I came back as editorial director in 98, all that was gone. Scott Lobdell's X-Men were different from Fabian's X-Men, were different from Larry's Wolverine, were different from this, were different from that.
Right.
And once, and then once Grant came in with new X-Men, the paradigm was shattered, because for me, the essence of the book was structured around the fact that the X-Men themselves were ideally a mystery. There weren't that many mutants in the world, and a vast number of them, because they were unattractive, lived in the basement of New York, a mile below the city, and were never seen, and therefore we could ignore them. The fact that there were only 100 of them or 200 of them meant they were mostly a mystery, an urban legend. So governments could be doing stuff to find them, but to the general public they were just, I have no idea. The minute Grant came in and with new X-Men made them public, and B, made them so vast that there were mutant communities and mutant towns, and if you assume that at that point there were a couple of 100,000 of them, or God forbid, 1 million or more, then suddenly the game is over. It's not a case of who are these weirdos. It's a case of which community is Cro-Magnon and which community is Neanderthal. To me, it opened it opened a great many more opportunities for storytelling. But then, as many people in the office hated the fact that I did that as liked it. So 4 years later or so, John got together with a bunch of other people, and surprise, she came back. Here's the story. So Ann Nesenti and Barry Smith and I are out to talk about the plot for 199. And it's Friday, and we're at a local bistro. Back in the days when editors had expense accounts, and Marvel was a hugely successful company. And so as we sit down, Anne says, "Chris, sit down, drink your Coca-Cola. I have something to tell you." And I'm thinking, "Oh, that's nice. Am I getting a raise?" And she says, "Jim has authorized the resurrection of Jean Grey." I said an inappropriate word. I said, "Excuse me, I'll be back." Rushed back to the office, but it was a Friday night, and we were running late, and so Anne had plotted it this way, and everybody had gone home, including Shooter, and the elevator was locked. So I had to go back to the meeting. Barry's wondering, what the hell's the matter with him? And Anne's saying, "He's Chris, don't worry about it." And we plotted a great story. And I went home for the weekend, fumed, and came in Monday at the crack of dawn with a new pitch to Jim, based on the premise, two premises. One, we'd just done a whole arc of books and stories in X-Men built around the fact that Maddie Pryor-Summers had just had their first baby. And now you're telling me a story is about to be published, will be published in the next few months, where he walks out on his wife and child for his old girlfriend.
Not a very superhero-like.
I would not a very anything. There's no way in. So, I understand you want to bring the old gang together again. I have no problem with that. I have a better idea. Just basically think of him as a lifer getting re-upped. He's got to go back to Afghanistan. And so she understands, she accepts it, she's scared stiff, because where will this go? What will happen? Will he be, were living happily ever after in Alaska. Now he's going back to the front, and what if something happens to him? Yada yada yada. The same thing. For me, perfect. I could write stories circling around that for years. More importantly, okay, he's the Charles Xavier of the new team. He's the dad. Okay, we need a girl. Okay, sorry, we need a female person. Well, we have one who's actually a Grey. Who? Jean's sister. Why? Well, she's a mutant. I've established that. Better yet, what's her power? She's a living Cerebro. She hasn't really ever used her power. The story's structured around her inexperience and other factors. So the idea is she senses a mutant. They go out, they find it. She activates the powers. They deal with it, and they move on to the next story. But because of her inexperience, she can make mistakes, and thereby you end up with fights. Yeah. Not so happy endings. More importantly, she's single. Wait, that means the other three guys, Hank and Bobby and Warren, have something to do. Not have a shot. Warren's got a girlfriend, and Bobby's gay, though we don't know that yet.
Was Bobby always?
No, he was never gay.
Okay, I was about to say, because I remember him hitting on Jean like day
Well, everybody hit on Jean day one at the school. The fact that she was like 16 and he was like 12.
Let's
You
not
know.
let the numbers get in the way.
No, but the point is that what I mean is that the other three characters are suddenly have a rationale for moving center stage. Otherwise, all you've done is re-establish the original paradigm of the original team, where the other three people were essentially irrelevant. And to me, I mean, hell, I would have written that one.
So you pitched this idea to Shooter.
And I pitched it, and he liked it. I mean, he said, if I want to do that with another character, or with Maddie and the X-Men, not Maddie, sorry, with Jean's sister and the X-Men, fine. But he'd already made a commitment. I mean, from my perspective, God forbid editors ever change their mind. That never happened to me. Oh, wait. Yes, it did. Dark Phoenix.
One of the other things that I've noticed about your writing is, and this is my estimation, and you'll correct me on it, is that you seem to sometimes leave these threads,
Dangling plot threads?
these dangling threads out there that could potentially be pulled later on.
Yep.
How purposeful was that, and how well did that serve you over the 17 years that you were doing the X-Men to be able to revisit those plot threads from time to time to tell a different story or tell?
Well, not a different story, an evolutionary story.
Yeah.
I mean, I think every writer does that. I mean, Hogwarts is full of threats. I'll go back and tell the story of this kid, in the back of class, yada, yada. We've only actually explored 2 of the houses. What about the other 2? Same with Game of Thrones. There's a lot about that you always end up leaving bits and pieces. I mean, that's theoretically where editors earn all their money, is getting rid of them and whacking the writer on the head for being so sloppy. But a lot of that also comes out of the increasing over the decades time pressure. If you're 6 months ahead, if you've got 6 months to fix things, it's very unlikely. There are a lot less moments of carelessness or sloppiness. If you've got to get it out instantly, whole different equation.